Well, welcome to this edition of the DMZ America podcast episode. I forgot the word podcast. This is going to be a good one. Right out of the
Don't worry,
chute.
there's that new Alzheimer's drug, Scott.
Yeah, but I'll forget to take
Kimba. You can sign up.
This is Thursday, August 17th, 2023. This is episode 113, and we are doing something for the first time for the second time. How exciting is that? Charles Lipson is our first return guest. He's appeared on this podcast about a year and a half ago. And there's a reason for this, because Charles is A, one of my heroes, and B, he will bring something to the table. So Charles, thanks for joining us.
Indeed. Thanks, Charles.
Well, I appreciate it. I knew you had my baseball card, Scott, but I didn't know I was actually your hero.
You absolutely. You know, some guys have, but sports scientists. I have Charles Lipson, who is the Peter B. Ritzma Professor of Political Science Emeritus at the University of Chicago, where he founded the program on international politics, economics, and security, and a Spectator World contributing writer. He also writes for Real Clear Politics. So he's a smarty pants, as we like to say in the Stantis household.
Sophisticated.
So we're class. Yeah. Stantis is our class, if nothing else. Okay, so let's dive right into it. Charles, the reason we're bringing Charles in, along with Ted and I, is we have been talking about the Hunter Biden case ever since the revelation of the the stone drunken, what was methed out? I don't know. He was on everything.
Crack. I think he's done all the drugs and some that don't exist, and also. But crack, he's most famous as a crackhead. I mean, everybody has to have their specialty.
I think they've caught him with everything but licking a frog.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I'm kind of intrigued by that frog licking thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, So we've been talking about this, and ever since it came to light about the laptop and the information thereof and how that got leaked out. And I think all of us, it's safe to say, have at the beginning of the story said, this looks, there's smoke here. Let's see if there's fire. I don't think any of us have been hysterical about covering this story, but we do say this is serious. And there's Charles, one of your most God almighty. I think I'm having a stroke. Anyway, one of Charles' most recent columns for Spectator was Hunter's new special counsel also needs investigating, discussing David Weiss, the U.S. attorney, and why. Can we just dive right in, Charles, and have you explain why David Weiss is the wrong guy for this job?
Well, let's start with that. David Weiss has spent 5 years investigating to produce a few charges, which were clearly messed up charges, confused charges, that one single question from the judge, an obvious question, what do you actually agree on, the two sides? And it turned out they didn't agree on the most fundamental things. That unraveled the agreement. But it took him 5 years to come up with that, and it should have taken him about a month and a half. During that period of time, he let major charges expire. And we have reports which have not been denied from nonpartisan, very professional IRS investigators who say they were told by Weiss's top assistant, Leslie Wolf, that they weren't going to pursue anything that led toward Joe Biden.
With the reason being what?
She didn't give a reason. And
Delaware, you don't need
we also know that the IRS people were going to raid a place where Hunter had stored documents, and we know that I think it was she who then tipped off Hunter's legal team and the Secret Service, and they cleared everything out of the place that was going to be searched, and they got rid of everybody who was going to be interviewed. So it seems to me that there are very serious problems in terms of how intensely he wants to investigate this. And we also have this problem that he told Congress in a letter, and Garland, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, told Congress under oath that that Weiss had all this authority to bring cases anywhere he wanted, and then we know that he was unable to bring them into places. What I think will happen now is that the cases will be brought in D.C. and in California, where he wanted to bring them, but they will do everything possible to create a fire break here, like they do in a big city fire. They knock down things, whatever they have to do to prevent this from getting to Joe Biden, who has, and by the way, on that, at least one person who met directly with Hunter and Joe together and said business was discussed at that meeting, and volunteered to come before a grand jury, was never called before the grand jury. So those are factual points, and what they point to me is a cover-up.
Charles, you can't have facts. Are you nuts? Come on.
No one has any interest in that. So Weiss is now a special counsel. He's been elevated by Merrick Garland. Charles, what do you think about, my theory, it's not a strongly held one, but it's my trial theory right now, is that 95% of voters aren't paying attention to this the way that we are, and therefore, and that part's 100%. But the vast majority of voters, it's just the fact of there being a special counsel kind of helps the Trump campaign, even though Republicans are complaining for the reasons that you've just enumerated about Weiss's conflicts of interest. But it's not going to matter, maybe, because in the end, in the voters' minds, they're like, Trump's dirty. Oh, but Biden's dirty too. And so what's the difference between them? It kind of, in sort of on the bumper sticker version of it, politically, if not legally, it seems to make it look like it's a contest between two rogues. What do you think?
I think that's a very smart analysis. I think that it makes a difference that the story about Hunter and Hunter himself doesn't matter. He's a private citizen. But the point is,
in the White House.
Yeah, the point is he was obviously, and it's more than just he was trading on the name of the family and doing it when Joe Biden was in office. But all of these telephone calls to his son, who was doing business and so forth, makes him look dirty. But and I have a kind of concept about what was really going on there. But
we'd love to hear that.
But yeah, it seems to me the fact that the Washington Post, New York Times, NBC, CBS, well, CBS covers it a little bit because Catherine Herridge, reporter at CBS, is actually honest and a serious reporter. ABC, they just don't cover it at all. So this is not like Watergate, right, which got not just intensive coverage, but investigation. Newspapers are busy not investigating this. My theory about what happened here is that while Joe Biden, and it's just a guess, while Joe Biden was vice president, he realized that the nod for the presidential nomination would go to Hillary, and that what he wanted to do was just feather his nest while he still had the chance. Mm-hmm. And one of life's little rules is don't make a drug addict your bag man.
I like that theory. I've quoted you on that, Charles. And I think it's right. And I think this all would have worked out if Biden hadn't yielded to the temptation to run for president in 2020. It would not have mattered. I read an interesting...
Or if the Democrats had held the House, right? All this was available to them for the first 2 years. They didn't touch it.
Well, that's true too. But I'm just saying, if you hadn't, both of those preconditions needed to be there. They certainly had the media in their pocket, which that seems to be breaking. What about the theory that I've read? I read at least in God, what's his name? The lawyer who's on Fox all the time, a very smart guy.
Turley.
Yeah, Jonathan Turley. And he said his theory, and I agree with it, is, Joe Biden's 80 years old. He's in the, it's fair to say, in the last chapter of his life. And what do you want to do when you're in the last chapter of your life? You want to provide for your children. And so if a benefit, even if I think Joe directly got money, but let's just say Joe didn't directly get money, just the fact that he was willing to help his son get money in a corrupt way is a direct benefit. It's technically indirect, but it's really a direct benefit to Joe, because like if I let my son corruptly trade on my name in order to enrich himself, that gives me some comfort, knowing it helps me, as opposed to the usual way of I go and work hard and invent cool things and draw great cartoons and have lucrative podcasts, and then I sell those services and then I leave that in my will to my son. It's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Plus, I want to get your thoughts on that. And also the thought that apparently it's on the laptop. The way this grift worked in part was that Joe handed his bills to Hunter and said, "Hey, Hunter, will you pay for my retaining wall?" That was one of them at my beach house in Delaware. Hey, Hunter, here's my AT&T bill for last month. Pay this. So he would drop a big pile of bills on Hunter's desk, and Hunter would pay them with the money that he got from influence peddling to Romania, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and who am I forgetting here? China. So that's there's probably others. I mean, what do you think about that line of thought?
I think that makes a lot of sense. I would just say this in defense of Hunter paying some of those bills. If he was living at the house during a part of that time, it would be perfectly legitimate for you to ask your son, who is living at your beach house and not paying any rent, to go ahead and pick up X or Y. Right. I think a big problem is that Joe seemed to have a burner phone.
Yes.
And all of that material.
And more shell companies than a real estate developer.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you're right, though, about the political impact. You will be able to tell when Democrats don't think Joe Biden is a good bet to continue, when the Washington Post and New York Times start running major stories about this. And so far, they've been reluctant to do that. And I think part of the reluctance is that the bench is not very strong. Look at guys like Newsom. They would have to defend the fact that he was once the mayor of San Francisco, and the state bird of California is a U-Haul truck. I mean, they have a lot of problems getting.
Although that didn't stop Bill Clinton from becoming president after presiding over the prosperous economy of Arkansas.
Well, to be fair,
that's true. It helped that Ross Perot ran, didn't it?
Yeah, that helped. And it also helped a lot that during his tenure, Bill Clinton took the reading scores of Arkansas from being 48th in the country to 47th in the country.
Okay.
Just saying.
Yeah, Alabama. Whatever. I assume it's Alabama.
Alabama scores for our math scores are so low, we're below Guam. Not that there's anything wrong with Guam, but we're below Guam. I'm not kidding, but that's an issue altogether.
I am not wearing a T-shirt that says literacy is overrated, but I have seen such T-shirts on sale in Alabama.
They should be misspelled.
It needs to be said here that that Charles Lipson is the pride of Marks, Mississippi.
Yes.
Named after was it Carl or Groucho? I can't remember.
No, it was actually named after a German Jewish peddler named Leopold Marx. And in the era when that whole area of the Delta, which is the area south of Memphis, Tennessee, was flooded and had old growth forests and everything, you couldn't settle it. It doesn't have antebellum homes. And the reason is not only you had to drain them, and you had to cut down the forest, but there was no treatment for yellow fever and malaria.
Yeah.
And so the first people who came through, but our little town was named Riverside, and the Illinois Central Railroad said, if you sell us the right of way, Mr. Marks, we'll name our depot Marks. And the town had to change its name because of the Illinois Central.
Illinois corruption. It knows
well,
no borders.
Listen, when the railroads came into Chicago during the Civil War, you know who owned all the right of way? Stephen Douglas.
No.
It's absolutely true. Chicago, what a town, huh?
I know a guy. I know
a guy who knows a guy.
So speaking of a guy, let's leapfrog a little bit and look where we are now with the Hunter investigation. Right. Is there a connective tissue? Can they connect Joe to this stuff? There seems to be deposits into Joe and Jill's accounts that can't be explained. I mean, significant 7-figure account deposits. Oh,
I didn't know that. Tell me about that,
Ted.
Yeah, there's $5.5 million in two separate deposits. So 5.5 times 2, hit Joe and Jill's personal account in 2017 and 2018. They interestingly declared the income, but they never revealed the source. Now, we know that Joe didn't have a speaking career. We know that he didn't write any books. We know that
he didn't read any.
Probably didn't read many. Jill, I don't think the teaching gig paid quite that much. So unfortunately, it should, but it doesn't. So the money's just unexplained. That time period correlates perfectly with the depth of Hunter Biden LLC. So it just sort of seems like, well, now
he's out of office at that time.
He is out of office at that time. That's right. And there was a sense, and it's hard to say because Bo was dying then, so Joe was preoccupied. Who knows?
Well, that's happened to me. $10 million has been deposited into my bank account, but I was preoccupied with buying some new shoes.
Right, you're busy,
and I just couldn't keep track. I was surprised when I saw the bank statement.
Pleasantly, I would think.
Can I jump in real quick and ask you guys this, because we're saying this is corrupt what Hunter did, and it is. I'm on board with you on this.
By
However,
definition.
we have let's look at Chelsea Clinton, who after the Clintons left office, she went to what kind of firm was it? No. Before that, she had a $250,000 a year job, which to this day she cannot explain what the hell she did, and gets pissed off when asked.
And what happens to no-show union jobs and so forth? The politicians who put somebody, Illinois politicians have done it all the time. You put somebody in a no-show job, and you go to jail for it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's not as if these are innocent crimes. I think that I'll make a couple of points here. The first is that voters look forward, not backward. Mm-hmm. And this is going to be a big problem for Trump in particular, who is backward looking to, really won that election. And that's kind of his main theme is revenge. But I think that this thing with Joe Biden illustrates something that a lot of people in the country know in their gut. It used to be that when you retired from Congress, you went home. You went back to Illinois, Mississippi, Alabama, wherever it was. Nobody does that anymore. Why? There's so much money inside the Beltway for people who know a guy who knows a guy. It's true for every retired general. Mm-hmm. They don't do what George Marshall did, which is retire to Leesburg, Virginia, and sit on the back porch. They work for General Dynamics or Northrop or all of that. And That's why this song, and I wrote a column about it, Rich Men North of Richmond by Oliver Anthony. I wrote a column. You can get it at my website, charleslipson.com. It has a link to the song and my column, which is that this populism is rooted in a real grievance. Now, there's a danger to populism. It almost always veers off into hatred of all kinds of marginalized groups and so forth, blacks, immigrants, Jews, whatever. But it's not as if the grievances aren't real. And to write, it's a clever line, the rich men north of Richmond, but it's pointing to the DC suburbs. And I think it's the most downloaded song on the internet, and there's a reason.
So why don't we take a quick break? We'll come back and we're going to talk about how this impacts 2024, if at all. I think it has a massive impact myself. But, you know, as my friends like to point out, especially my Democratic friends, we're living under the most vigorous, the most forward-thinking, and the best president ever.
Your friends live in Maui?
God. Well, he finally got around. By the way, did either of you guys hear the president's comments on Maui today?
No.
Do yourself a disservice and do it, because it'll make you very sad, because he's stumbling, fumbling. He's got good days and bad days. And today was a bad day. He had difficulty reading what was clearly a prepared statement. He's stumbling all over.
Look, we have a Democratic senator now from California who's in conservatorship. Her assets have to be looked after legally. She has to be told whether to vote yes or no. It feels like
she's like Britney Spears.
Without the singing voice.
Yeah, or the body.
On that note, we'll be right back. This is the DMZ America podcast. I'm Scott Stantis, coming to you from the right, by the way.
And I'm Ted Rall, coming to you from the left.
And we're joined by the brilliant Charles Lipson. We'll be back in just a second. Stick around.